Don't bring that trouble with you. Don't bring that trouble with you.
Well, hello, and I hope you're all as excited as I am to take yet another step into the world of Tamora Pierce and Beka Cooper. If you haven't seen my review on Terrier, hop on over, go check it out, tell me what you think. Today I'm doing Bloodhound, and if you are unfamiliar with Tamora Pierce, she is a fantasy YA author. Her journey began with Alana the Lioness in the Song of the Lioness Quartet, and in my last review, I said that's probably the best place to start, because while this trilogy is actually the beginning of everything, like chronologically, it is at the start, there's just all kinds of little things that can't be fully appreciated without having read the Alana series or the Wolf Speaker series. I'm gonna get those books in here too, but if I haven't done it yet, yeah, go check them out. I have some right here. This is actually only one of the two sets that I have. My other set, I think, is over there on my other bookshelves, and that is the I Make Notes in It set. This is the Let's Look Pretty and We Can Lend It Out set. But I'm obsessed with the world building that Pierce is able to achieve. I will kind of give you a little bit of a warning that she has developed immensely since the Alana series. So while I enjoy the creativity in the world that Tamora Pierce has built, over time, because I discovered it 20 years ago, as I have aged, I have begun to enjoy it less. And for just the layman reader, the person who just simply enjoys reading for reading, you probably won't have any issues. But for me, who has built her life around books and writing, my reading maturity has gotten to a point where I can see where she could have done things better. I still don't want that to deter you from enjoying the series, but that was just a little forewarning I wanted to put in here before I started. As far as this trilogy goes, it revolves around a young woman named Beka Cooper who lives in the land of Tortall, and she is a dog. What is a dog, you may ask? The dogs are essentially the police force of Tortall, and Beka Cooper has decided to be a dog in like the worst part of the city, which is essentially the slums. And that is actually something you see more of in Terrier. In Bloodhound, she actually gets to do a little bit of travel. And that is something also that I feel like you can't truly appreciate without having read some of Pierce's other works, because they essentially just stay in the same places, but they mention these towns, these ports that we actually get to see in this Beka Cooper series. In Terrier, we get to meet Beka in her puppy year, which basically means it's her first year as a dog, but she's untrained. So she is paired with a senior dog team, and that would be Clary Goodwin and Matthias Tunstall. However, in Bloodhound, Mattis, as he's referred to, has his legs broken, so he actually stays in the lower city while she and Clary go off to Port Caynn on a hunt. I need to back up a little bit. One thing that I loved so much about Terrier was Pierce dropped little hints, or not even hints, like I felt like they were just part of the story that she then developed into another story. But some little details that she had included in Terrier were Achoo the Scent Hound and the fact that there had been false coin circulating throughout the realm. There are very minor points, like literally passing mentions, but they come into huge play in Bloodhound, because what has happened is in Terrier, one of her fellow puppies dies. And so one of their other friends, who had been like a second-year dog, had been in a relationship with this girl, and after she dies, he's like, you know what? Being a dog just isn't worth it. You know, this is like the 5th time that I am trying to say this sentence and I can't get it out. You know what? Being a dog just isn't worth it. Her death was senseless, so I think I'm gonna go to the other side of the law. Now, normally this would not be important. However, he had been a handler of a scent hound, and so, you know, this was just passing mention until Bloodhound, when we open up and Beka is seen the dog's old scent hound being mistreated, and she's like, look, you know, I know that this dog has been passed around a little bit. I know this dog. I know this dog's original handler. So maybe I should give you some pointers as to maybe how to handle this hound named Achoo. And the handler's like, you know what, if you think you know so much, why don't you take the dog? So then that is kind of how we set out as to why Beka and Goodwin are the pair that is sent to Port Caynn, because this hunt, which is revolving around this false coin, is needing a scent hound. And so she's like, I've had this dog for a couple weeks, maybe a month or something. Let's see how this goes. So she and Goodwin go off to Port Caynn, and, you know, there's a lot of, like, as much as I really enjoy the mystery that Pierce sets up, this book, like, there really isn't much that we need to figure out. Like, we basically know who is behind the false coin, but the problem is really, how do you catch them? How do you pin it on them? How do we wrap up the problem? Which I think is just a really interesting ability. Like, most people, the whole crux of a story is solving the mystery. Whereas this one is like, how do we put the problem to rest? Also, this is something else I thought was fantastic. Beka has a cat, and if you know the Alana series, you're already familiar with this cat, but her cat's name is Pounce. In the Alana series, it's Faithful, but Pounce/Faithful is actually a constellation who, from time to time, decides to grace us mere mortals with his presence. But in this instance, Pounce is actually, I guess, called back to wherever he needs to be, and so we are left with one less tool in our toolbox. And what I love so much about the removal of Pounce is because if Pounce was there, Beka's life would be far too easy. And this is something that we see early on in the book, because she had gotten so used to Pounce being able to warn her of danger that she ends up getting a beat down by the brothers of someone that she had arrested. And it really reminds me of J.K. Rowling. I mean, like, we know I'm going to bring it up because I love Rowling, but if you're familiar with Harry Potter, and if you're not, like, you need to learn how to read, because you are missing out. But at some point in the series, Harry is gifted this magical map, and the map just allows him to see where anybody is at any point in time within Hogwarts. However, in the Goblet of Fire, Rowling removes that tool from his toolbox because she realized it would be far too easy. Like, there would be no issues if he had this map. And so as soon as I saw this thing about Pounce being taken out of the equation, I was like, it's the same thing. Where on one hand, we as readers are like, who cares? Like, it's not a big deal. It's just a little detail. But if you have a cat who can sense problems, or who has like this sixth sense, this innate ability, this magic power for, you know, whatever the need may be, like, how is Beka gonna run into trouble, you know? And so, yes, so before she even gets to Port Caynn, she is essentially crippled because she no longer has pounds and she has to rely on her own wits, which are not to be sneezed at. One of my favorite things about Beka, and honestly about all of Pierce's protagonists, who are women with a couple exceptions, but I'm not really going to talk about that. They are so strong. Like, if you are looking for strong female protagonists, check out a Tamora Pierce book because they know how to handle their own business. They do not let a man put them down. They answer to nobody but themselves. And so, yeah, like, Beka is so capable. It's like, why would she have been anything else but a dog? It's like she was born to be a dog. Yes, she's crippled because she doesn't have pounds, but she knows what she's doing. Like, all right, nobody's gonna push her around. But enough of that. Let's get into the meat of the story. As I mentioned, this whole coal mongering was mentioned in Terrier, but in Bloodhound, very early on, it is a major problem. And so Beka and Clary Goodwin are enlisted to go to Port Caynn because they have the scent hound, and it's like, look, you guys know more about this than anybody else, and so you're the best team to go there. Don't let people know that you're there for that reason, so here's some other excuses that you can give people, but this is your main reason. And so they get there, and it's not too far into the book that Beka learns that the coalmonger is the Port Caynn's rogue. And, you know, if you don't know who the rogue is, basically the mob boss. It's the person who rules the underworld, and her name is Pearl Skinner. And so, yeah, like, even though it doesn't take a long time to figure out who the coalmonger is, you do have to figure out how did it start and why, and then how can you bring her down. And that's where things get a little bit dicey, because Goodwin and Beka had met these guys back home. Doesn't that just sound so bad? They met some guys. Anyways, they met these guys. There's Hans Steen and Dale Rowan, and like, people that they had come across back home were like, oh, well, my fake coin came from these guys that had come over on a boat. Like, we gambled, and that's where I got this money from. And so eventually Beka puts the pieces together that, like, somehow these guys are involved. And it sort of breaks her heart because they've been hanging out. They're buds. And then she and Dale have been like, what's up? Like, you're cute. You're pretty hot. Like, tiptoe around things for a little while. And eventually she realizes Dale's not part of it, but the other two are, and there's, like, I guess I could say I was a little disappointed by why they were involved. Spoiler, Hans had been in the military, and he'd had a really poor sergeant. And so this sergeant would abuse his men, and one day Hans stood up for himself, and then he got dishonorably discharged. And he was so upset because he's like, I served my country for X amount of time, and this is what I got for it, for doing something that I don't think was wrong. And so he was like, I just want to get back at the crown. I want to get back at the people who put me in this situation. So I understand. Greed is at the root. Money is at the root of evil. But I thought it was a little flimsy. I think that is very unusual for Tamora Pierce. Although, while I had no qualms about Terrier, there were a couple of things in Bloodhound that I thought were unsatisfactory, and Hans's reason for being involved in the coal mongering was one of them. And so it's kind of like Pearl wanted money, and the only way she could get it was to work with Hans, because he had found, I think it was a silver deposit, and so they worked together. Nobody would have ever put them together because nobody would have ever associated him with having been able to find this vein of silver. She used him, he used her, they achieved their ends, and then Hans and Steen die. And that was also something else. I was like, okay. I mean, honestly, like, throughout the book, we knew that these guys were involved in some form or fashion. But literally, so they go out of town on a silver run, because what was happening is coals, rather than the silvers being silver all the way through, the coal mongerers were coating coals in silver, which means they're worthless. So he's on a silver run to get more silver to coat the coals in, and they are arrested upon re-entry to Port Caynn, and then they're murdered in jail. The thing about Beka is she can talk to the dead. Let me back up just a little bit and tell you magic is an integral part to any Tamora Pierce novel. But what makes Beka and this trilogy so unique is she doesn't have magic. But what she can do is speak to the dead. And she does it via pigeon. I know, that sounds really strange, but what she can do is ghosts ride pigeonback until the mystery of their death is solved, or until they are able to relay a message to a loved one. Like, basically until their unfinished business is finished. Steen and Hans are killed, and in fly some birds, and they're like, what's up? We're here. And she's like, oh man, oh man. And this is when we learn about the explanation behind why they were involved. I mean, Steen, I think it was just an opportunity. Hans was really like, I wanted to bankrupt the entire country. I need to go back to the beginning because I really skipped over so much. Yes, Beka, Goodwin, come to Port Caynn. They go around the gambling houses because this must be how the Coles are getting into the money stream. And Beka and Dale are forming this romance. And then find all the little pieces to the puzzle, and they eventually are like, all right, it is Pearl Skinner. And so what Goodwin does is she's like, I'm gonna go back and I'm going to get reinforcements, and then we're gonna arrest her. We're gonna put a halt to all of this. But in the meantime, Beka learns, so when they first got to Port Caynn, Goodwin was like, we need to go see a friend of mine. He's a silversmith, and he can give us some answers. So while Goodwin is gone, Beka learns that this entire silversmith family has been arrested. And so she's like, they're not guilty. I have to figure out a way to get them out of jail. And so she goes to, and I'm smiling because I love this moment. She goes to Lionel of Trebond, who is a big deal. I honestly couldn't tell you what his title is. I should because of how many times I've read this book. But I'm smiling because he is Alana's like great grandfather or something. And so I just like, this is the reason that I say you gotta read Alana and the Wolf Speaker series first, because you won't recognize his name. There are a lot of just little things that are not gonna make you smile. So yes, Beka goes to Lionel of Trebond, and he's not a good dude, alright? We love Alana, but apparently she does not come from fantastic stock. And so because he essentially was being bribed into keeping quiet because he was afraid that Pearl would come after his family. So now that Beka is coming to him and being like, look, we all know Pearl is at fault. And he's like, take her away. Let's make her disappear. Thankfully, she is rescued. But now she's got to figure out where to hide. Where do you think she goes to hide? she goes to Pearl Skinner's den, and I'm like, I don't understand. I mean, I do, but I don't. It's essentially the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So she's there. He brings Pearl a pearl necklace, which is the way to Pearl's heart. And he essentially seeks sanctuary. She's hanging out there. Dale shows up. They get a little jiggy with it. And then Pearl learns Beka lied. So Becca's like, see ya! And she jets out of there. Thankfully, Goodwin has returned, and they're all like, all right, we're saddling up our horses, we're ready to ride. And they go back to Pearl's den, and chaos ensues. Pearl and her main henchmen disappear, and what Beka ends up doing is following Pearl. Like, it's inadvertent. She does not mean to. In a sense, she had a main pigeon named Slapper. Slapper was not a very nice pigeon. He literally beat up on Beka, but he was a fixture amongst her pigeons. He had followed her from Tortall, and so the fact that one of the henchmen, cut the bird in two, devastated and angered her so much that she's like, I'm gonna get recompense. So she follows him and the people he's with, not knowing that one of those people is Pearl Skinner. So she's following Pearl, and eventually she learns, oh wow, I'm on the right trail, because there were many escape hatches, and all of the more senior dogs with their scent hounds went in the more obvious places, whereas Beka and Achoo, they were just trying to get even, right? Or not even get even, have revenge. Eventually, they re-meet up with Goodwin, and Goodwin's like, you're such an idiot. You don't leave your partner. Which, to me, I'm thinking, yes, you're very right. But at the same time, was it really so wrong? I guess I just don't understand police work and partner work and how all of that goes. Like, if you have a lead and it's time sensitive, do you just wait around until someone's available to help you? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But part of me is like, she was just doing her job. They continue to track Pearl. They catch her, and everything is hunky-dory. Except for one thing, and if anything, this has always been my biggest issue with Bloodhound. There's some things that you pick up on eventually. After you have seen the big picture, after you have seen the forest, you can start seeing the individual trees. But this is something that has always stuck out to me. It's like a felled tree in that forest. And that is Beka and Dale's romance. So Beka, she's a cool chick. Like, she has a code of ethics. She knows what she does and doesn't want in a man. She's not highly sexually motivated. She addresses this in the very first novel, where essentially she tried being with a guy, but it was nothing special. And so while I don't mind the romance in this book, because it does enable us to see another side of her, because she's pretty tough-skinned, she's pretty hard-edged. And so to see a softer side of her is nice, although she's kind of awkward, because she doesn't know how to be feminine. So we have this really great lead up, a lot of flirtation, and then eventually she and Dale get together, and promiscuity ensues. Apparently I can't say that word. Ensues. And then as soon as she comes to Pearl Skinner's court, and they go off into a bedroom, and then she goes off to do what she needs to do to capture Pearl, of course, some of her first thoughts are, does Dale know? What would Dale think of me now, covered in muck and slime and being completely gross? And one of her first thoughts when she comes to in the hospital is like, has Dale called? And they're like, no, Dale has not made any kind of contact. And then she meets back up with him. He's like, I mean, we had a great time, right? But I think that's really all there was to it. And it's not that I thought they needed to have some great romance. I was cool with the fling. You just knew it was a middle book. I mean, it's quite possible that it could have been a relationship that carried on into something more. But just fitting with the book, I didn't expect anything more. I didn't want anything more. But literally, for him to sleep with her, and then like the next day or 2 days, however long it was for her to recover, shows up at the place she's staying. He's like, okay, we're done. I mean, like, that was it. There's really no explanation except you live there, I live here, and it's never worked for me before. If all he wanted from her was a tumble in the hay, did he have to, like, come to Pearl Skinner's court and sleep with her again? I do not understand. I thought it was abrupt, and it was unsatisfying, and it was underdeveloped. He had no problems with her not being from Port Caynn before that. Maybe it was the fact that her hunt had come to a close, so the reality of her being gone showed him that he didn't want to try any harder. He did not want to make this into anything more serious. But I think if they had not met up at Pearl Skinner's court, I would have been fine. They hung out for a night or two, they had their fun, and then once Pearl Skinner was caught and all the coal-mongering stuff was finished with, then they both come to this conclusion, or he comes to her and she's like, yeah, I agree. But almost at the same time as he's saying, I don't want this, she's saying, can we try this? And then he leaves, and Pounce, who has reappeared, because isn't that how it is? Harry got his map back at the end of Goblet of Fire. Pounce comes back at the end of Bloodhound. And he's like, it's okay. If you want to be sad, you can be sad. And she's like, but I don't want to cry about this. Like, I don't know why it hurts so bad. And it's like, because you liked the guy and he just dropped you like a hot potato? You know, I wish that her inside feelings had matched her outside behavior. I know all of us women, we like to be strong. But Beka is not a sensitive person. So the fact that she's all sensitive and gooey inside right now, it felt out of character. And I really wish she'd been like, you know what? You're right, Dale. It was great while it lasted. You know, I'll see you on the flip side, but I want this as little as you do. It's like she wanted some kind of vehicle to perhaps show another side of Beka, or just to give us another point of interest, like a subplot that we could sink our teeth into and that we could enjoy, that was a little less serious than anything else that's going on in the book. But then once she didn't need it anymore, she just stopped. So that one continues to bother me. It will continue to bother me. I mean, I would kind of like to see him in Mastiff. Like, you know, she's out at the bread market and she sees him and she's like, what's up? Or, this is really awkward, I'm gonna look the other way and pretend I never saw you. Or, because there are not specific references to him, but there are references to their time together. So I think I don't know. I just needed more resolution. That's the end point. I needed more resolution. I guess, and I've been debating about this. About, is it really a con or is it not? Am I just trying to be nitpicky because I can't give another book like a perfect score? Or, you know, I'm not scoring these, and I really do have that one big issue. But this read, gosh, I can't even tell you how many times I've read this series, but this is the first time I've really thought about this point that I'm about to discuss. And it is the swiftness with which Beka and Goodwin were able to solve the mystery. I think they had a head start because they had put pieces together before coming to Port Caynn. But, like, is nobody else just as capable as they are? Was it because they already had some knowledge coming into it, and it really was then, all right, let's go to the gambling houses. Let's ask around. Like, oh, we hear something suspicious about what the rogue is doing, and then we're gonna put the pieces together. So it's not gonna take that long. Yeah, that's one thing that I'm kind of battling over is it really a problem, or am I just being nitpicky? But let's wrap up with the cons. I mean, that was actually the last one. So let's just move on to the pros. I can't sing Pierce's praises enough with her crafting. I talked about her creativity a ton in Terrier. She continues with this amazing world building, these fantastically deep, layered characters. Everything she does is so visceral. You can see, taste, touch everything in this world, and I never had a boring moment. Even I was gonna say in Harry Potter, but that's not true. I have a lot of favorite books where I have least favorite moments, where I feel like it gets really slow. But none of the books in this Beka Cooper series do that. Like, she just has such fantastic pacing. She knows exactly when to give us more, when to pull back, when to give us something a little bit easier, a little bit tougher. If you love a good fantasy novel, this is it. I wish that I had them on my shelves. They're in a box somewhere, but these are pretty thick books. And technically they are YA, even though Beka is like 17, 18 and is not really in young adult situations, because in this realm, she's essentially an adult already. But if you know anything about writing and about books, like, genres have average word counts, average pages. So, the books will be an average thickness. The Alana book, this is more of a middle grade novel size. I mean, if you even look at it, it's a small book and it's a short book. And then we have, what can I reach? My arms aren't that long. Give me a minute. Right, so then we have Cinder, which is the beginning of another fantastic series that I will eventually get around to. You compare them. Much bigger, much thicker. This is a normal YA novel. I would say Terrier, Bloodhound, and Mastiff add like this much more to it. Maybe even more. Like, actually, let me go hunt them down. I'll be back again. Okay, so here we go. First, Alana, right? Cinder, which, if you know anything about the Cinder series, this is also sci-fi fantasy. Cinder, okay? Alana, Cinder, Terrier. Love these covers, by the way. Whoever designed them, 2 thumbs up. Terrier, okay? Bloodhound gets a little bit, just slightly bigger. And then Mastiff, even bigger. My point being, YA should be about this. It should be Cinder. But fantasy sci-fi, because of all that world building, just gets, wrong book, just gets a little bit bigger. And with that, there's this potential to lose a reader's interest because There's so much description, but Pierce doesn't. She just knows how to keep the flow going so that we care about everything. Even when Beka is running through sewers, super creeped out, not even creeped out, grossed out. Like, I'm like, ew, this is nasty. Like, can you please go up to street level? It's still exciting because you don't know what's going to happen. Even though she's talking about the muck and the rats and all the little things that were like, do we really need to know this? There's a means to an end. I will forever love this series because of her storytelling. Fantastic characters, great pacing, developed, intricate plot, and I also love how she pulled elements from the first book that were seemingly unimportant. I do wish I could go. I do wish I could have gotten more of Goodwin. I felt like Pierce did send her off more often than not, left Beka alone, which just, I mean, it wasn't a problem because it didn't get boring, but I thought there was a little bit of missed opportunity in order for us to get to know Goodwin, because here's a spoiler alert, at the end of the novel, Goodwin essentially decides to retire from active dog duty. So instead of, being on the streets, catching the rats, she's the desk sergeant. And so we know we're not going to get any more of her, which we really don't, because once we get into Mastiff, they go a-hunting again, and she gets left behind. So yeah, Mastiff actually does a really great job of letting us get to know Tunstall. And oh boy, are we in for a wild ride with that book. I cannot wait to do a review on it for you, because I keep trying to figure out which one's my favorite. I mean, they're just all so impeccably done, but I think Mastiff just has a lot of the twists and the turns and just a really exciting plot. I can't wait to get to that one for you. But I think that's about it for today. I probably rambled on a whole lot more than you guys are interested in, so if you want to fast forward through bits, my feelings won't get hurt. I talk to me as much as I talk to you. So from me and all of my lovely books, I hope to see you later and have a great day. Bye!